Go ahead.
Okay. When were you born?
I was born, when or where? I was born in New Rochelle, New York.
Okay, both questions actually.
Uh,
What year were you born?
1922, March
Jeez.
24th.
You're older than Dad is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some of us
Dad was,
are.
Dad was born in 1924.
Yeah, he's a youngster.
When did you find out about World War II?
Well, when on what was it, November 7th,
December 7th?
December 7th, 1941,
When
Roosevelt,
Pearl Harbor Day?
when Pearl Harbor happened. And the next day, Roosevelt declared war.
And then when did you, were you in the Army?
Yeah, I was in college at the time as a math student, so I signed up for the Air Corps Meteorology School. I was a sophomore at that time, and because everybody's signing up for something or else they'd be drafted. And then I was supposed to go in March of, let's see,
42.
42 or 43 actually, and my orders never came, so they sent me to basic training in the Air Corps, which was Atlantic City, in about June of 43, and I did that, and then they had a whole lot of people, they didn't know what to do with them.
How long was basic training?
2 months. In Atlantic City, a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Stayed in one of the fine hotels there.
And they didn't know what to do with you?
Oh yeah, well, they had thousands of us they didn't know what to do with actually, so they started the Army Specialized Training Corps, and so they sent us all back to college at that point. And so in September, I was sent to New York and went to Brooklyn Polytech Engineering School. See, Hamilton's a liberal arts college, and I was sort of strong in math, and I wanted some engineering courses. So I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I was in sort of an advanced program there. And we studied physics and mechanics and things like that, chemistry.
Was this still 1943?
43. And then in January of 44, at that point they started needing people. So at that point they sent me orders to go into the Army and join the 75th Division at that point, out in maneuvers in Louisiana. And so we were taking maneuvers, I don't know if that gets into it, in Louisiana, or in Texas actually, most of it. And then in the division, I always stayed with that division. The division moved to Camp Breckenridge in Kentucky, right down the river here. And we were there in preparation again for Army work and basic training again and rifle work and so on. And we went overseas in that summer, and we landed in Liverpool, went down for 1 month staging in Swansea, or Llanelli is the name of the town.
Was this 1944 now?
Oh, 44, yeah.
This is 1944?
Yeah, well, they had just invaded. And they frankly needed cannon fodder right after that.
Yeah.
And so we were obviously replacement soldiers.
That's not a good position to be in.
Pardon?
That's not a good position to be in.
No, it's not in the infantry. And so we were staged there really for a month, during which time we marched a lot. Had a little side job as a company barber because I had kidded some fellas that I knew how to cut hair, and then lo and behold, they gave me the barber tools, but that's beside the point. And then along about November, we went up to Maastricht, Holland.
Which was in Allied hands by then.
Oh yeah, it was in Allied hands then.
What was your rank?
Private, or private first class by that time. Actually, when I went to engineering school, they promoted me from buck private to private first class. And then, and Christmas, just before Christmas up in Maastricht, we started realizing something was going on because there was an awful lot of flak out in the field where we were camped. And they put us on buses shortly thereafter, and it happened to be on Christmas morning when we were trucked into the Bulge area near Grand Manil, Belgium. And when we walked up the hill, we saw what the commotion was ahead, because one of the guys, at that point I was in H Company, which incidentally was lucky because the big, strong guys they put in the heavy weapons company, and technically sometimes they were a little further behind the lines rather than the front lines. So we were about 4 or 5 o'clock, we got up the road. There was a German Panzer tank there that had been, the tracks were cut off. And
This was on Christmas Day.
Christmas Day, yeah, on Christmas Day. I didn't know what day it was, and I was reading that book, and it turned out it was on Christmas Day.
Okay.
Was it in Ardennes?
And
She had a question? Yes,
was it in Ardennes?
Ardennes?
Were you Ardennes?
yeah, the Ardennes Forest it was.
What was basic training like? And what was your
It was
mission once you got out?
just a lot of marching and learning how to shoot a gun, and learning how to behave, learning how to take orders. That was basically it. They try to treat you sort of bad so that you learn to take orders easily. And I didn't mind it. And sometimes we'd take 20-mile hikes to make sure we could walk a long way. And of course we got our feet in shape. So the infantry soldier does a lot of walking, and so we did that.
What was your mission? I mean, did you...
Pardon?
What was your mission when you went out in infantry?
What was my mission? Well, really, my mission was to take orders from the guy ahead of me. Now, when we got to that point where the tank was, see, the Panzer tanks were coming through, and this was a real hilly area, and now the road was blocked with one of their tanks, and so there were about 10 or 15 tanks behind them. There were an awful lot of them. And our mission was to hold that area as the last resort. Had they gotten through where we were, they would have gotten on to Liège, which was a gas depot. And they wanted to get a hold of the American gas so that they could drive their tanks on down into Paris. So that's why there was a big push where we were to get through that area. But we were up in the hills, so that there weren't too many roads, and this was the last one blocked.
Were you ever suspicious of the Germans who impersonated
Pardon?
Were you ever suspicious of the Germans?
Can't hear you. Talk louder.
I'm sorry. Were you ever suspicious of the Germans who impersonated military and who spoke English?
I'm sorry.
The Germans put on American uniforms and spoke English and
Oh yeah,
infiltrated?
around us they did, but I never encountered those guys. Yeah, they were all through the area changing road signs and talking like Americans to try to fool us. But I personally didn't encounter any of those.
How did you keep the 15 tanks that were in line behind the disabled one?
Well, they kept themselves in line. You see, the tanks can't get too far ahead of themselves. They need to have the infantry around them. Because if the infantry isn't there, what'll happen is what's happened. We were like ants. There were so many of us around. And as soon as that kid from C Company shot the bazooka into the tanks, they naturally came around with the turret and just cut him in the middle. He was dead quick. But to this day, they aren't sure of his name, but he was a real hero.
Did you see that?
No, I did not see that. I just saw the tank after it was done. Because then we went, and then our captain, it was sort of interesting, sent us over to the woods to the right. And from here to that wall, all of these German tanks were lined up, going back and forth. Fortunately, they didn't see us. And about
Did you ever get shot at?
7 o'clock at night after it got dark early in the middle of the winter, it was Christmas Day, a lieutenant came in and said, "What are you guys doing here? You're behind the lines." He said, "Well, we're set here." He said, "Well, be very quiet," and that was the day I really understood what fear was. So he snuck us out of those woods, and then we had to build our fox hole or slit trench so we could sleep, and it was just actually next to the tank, and it's there today. We went on a trip up there now, 15 years ago, and there was my slit trench still where it was.
Crazy. Did you ever get shot at?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of times.
Did you ever receive any service crosses, silver stars, Legion of Merit?
No, I never did. I was in that squad, and what happens in the Army pretty fast, if you're a good soldier, I guess. Within a month I was a corporal, and then within another 15 days I was a staff sergeant, and so I was able to go up the ranks by being a staff sergeant. Then I had a squad, and when I was that, sometimes we'd have to leave our mortars behind and just act like riflemen, and at one point we had to climb a hill and cross the stream and go right into the machine guns to take the hill and get up, which we did. Lost a lot of friends that day, but
Did you ever go to France or England? You said you went to Liverpool?
well, yeah, I was fighting in France. Actually, see, we started in Holland, and then we went down to Belgium and fought. And then once we got to Germany, which was St. Vith, which was our core objective, it was ruined. And then they needed us down south, so we went down to Alsace-Lorraine, and we started again at the Vosges Mountains. That was in France, just north of Switzerland. And then we had to take what they called the Colmar Pocket, which was about 20 miles to the Rhine River. And we would have to sort of crawl on our stomachs as we were fighting, because every mile there was a town. And every day we'd take a town, then we were fighting with a Free French Army, and the next day they'd take the next town, and the third day we'd take the next town. So we were fighting every day for that month, or every other day for that month. And then we were sent back up to northern, back up to Holland actually, before the division crossed the Rhine and into Germany. But at that time, the Army started a rule. You see, your top sergeants were selected to be lieutenants because lieutenants got shot too much. And because they were always on patrol, finding out if the enemy was ahead, and that was a dangerous occupation, because if the enemy caught you behind the lines, you got shot at. So they needed a lot of lieutenants. So instead of promoting us, they decided to send us to school for a month, which was wonderful, because now we could get our health back. We could, we all had diarrhea, and we were messed up really, living outside without blankets for a month. And it was pretty cold.
How did you make it through the winter months? How did you and your fellow soldiers?
Well, we had the buddy system. When you slept at night with your buddy, and after you got warm on the front because you were hanging on to him on the other side, then you'd turn around and he'd get your back warm and he'd get his front warm. So that was how you kept warm at night. We didn't have you see, we were too far ahead of the line, so we didn't have our blankets or our sleeping bags.
Did you know anyone with frozen feet?
All we had was our raincoats and our overcoats and our boots, of course. And they gave us rations. Every day they'd give us a box for breakfast, lunch, and supper. They're called K-rations. And then they'd give us a pair of socks, which we always had wet feet. So we'd take off our wet socks and throw them away and put new socks on every day. And, that's how we lived. It's surprising what the body can take
Yeah.
when it has to.
Did you ever answer the question if you were shot at?
Oh yeah, I was shot at. Yeah, we were shot at for about a whole month. Because every time you take a town, you're shot at. They set up machine guns in the town, and so as you go forward, you have to crawl on your stomach. Really.
Did they have white sheets hanging out the windows ever?
What?
Did they have white sheets hanging out the window ever that they had surrendered?
No, a lot of Germans surrendered. Typically, we marched down a road. You marched in lines, it shows in the book, on two sides of the road, about 10 feet apart with soldiers. So and the roads were constantly bombed with mortar shells, so that if you're lucky, you escaped them. I was lucky. And every once in a while you'd look around and there'd be 3 or 4 Germans walking behind you because they were scared as the deuce
Yeah.
that they get shot. And so say, what are you doing here? And of course, no one spoke German and they didn't speak any English. But we corralled them and took them with us down the road, and at night we put them in a big circle, and guards were around them, actually.
You had to feed them though too, didn't you?
Pardon?
Did you have to feed them?
Oh yeah, well we had plenty of food. We had lots of K-rations.
Did you ever have to shoot anyone?
Pardon?
Did you ever have to shoot anyone?
You know, the way it worked, you don't know. You shot your gun a lot, and you went into a town, and so all of you shooting at the same time, you don't know what damage you were doing individually. It was called firepower war, and the Americans had a lot more firepower than the Germans at that point because they were getting pretty thin.
Did you see older people or young teenagers who were fighting?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Because
yeah.
Hitler.
Yeah, actually, in these towns that we took, those were what were behind the machine guns because the SS troops, or the real ones, actually, they were captured during the Battle of the Bulge, and there weren't too many of them around anymore.
Yeah.
Were
What
there-
I don't. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Were there any celebrations after the victory of the Battle of the Bulge?
We just went to our next post.
Did you remember celebrating at the end of the war?
Yeah, we were happy it was over. Yeah, I imagine we celebrated. I can't remember too much about that. See, when I went in the Army, I'd never drunk any liquor before, but it was flowing pretty fast over there. And so we got a little bit of drunk, I guess, and when the war was over. Actually, when the war was over, by this time, I had become an officer, and I was back with my original rifle company, F Company, and we were in charge of displaced persons camps in Germany. And so it was, you know, thought we were in seventh heaven because we didn't have to sleep in the ground anymore.
Yeah.
And so when the war was over, we cheered, naturally. But
How long did it take you to get back to the United States once the war was over?
well, it took me a year. See, unfortunately, if I had come back as an enlisted man and not gone to officer's school at the end of the, see, I went to that first school in Fontainebleau, France. The war was still raging there. We hadn't crossed the Rhine. But after while I was there, they crossed the Rhine. And so the fighting was really over for our division because we were in the northern section around Dartmouth. So when I returned to the unit, we didn't have any more fighting, but we had to take care of displaced persons.
Right.
So we did that. But because, see, you build up points. You get a point for being in the Army for a month, an extra point for being overseas, an extra point for combat. So I had lots of points. But then when I was an officer, these weren't enough to get home because
you needed more points.
because I was now on an officer status, and so I had to wait a year before I got home.
Mm-hmm.
During that time, I had a lot of assignments, but mostly I was commander of a prisoner of war, a German prisoner of war camp around Reims, France.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever witness casualties?
Oh yeah. Oh, sure, the hard part is the day after the battle. You have to go back and pick up your dead friends and bring them to the ambulances that are now, by this time, you're far enough forward so that the trucks could get in there and they take them back in. Yeah, they were very heavy too.
Do you know why it was called, named the 60-mile bulge? Do you know why it was named the 60-mile bulge, the hike or the trail that you guys traveled on?
The what?
60-mile bulge, you must have read somewhere that it was
Yeah.
called 60 miles. That must have been the penetration that the Germans had.
Oh yeah, we were at the back of it, so
Yeah.
we had to come in all the way. We had to take all the land that they had taken and recapture it.
Why is it that when I speak at all and ask any question to my father, he freezes up and chokes up and he can't say anything? He flat out can't. And he has, for 70 years it's been like that. He can't say anything. And it's not that he's not allowed to, he just can't. He physically and emotionally.
I don't know. I don't know. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Maybe Dave was just too emotional about it to speak about it. It was interesting, you know, when we got back after the war, no one was interested in asking us any questions. And it wasn't until 10 or 15 years ago with
Yeah.
my grandchildren that they started asking
That's
questions.
when he talked to my daughter. That's the only time he spoke, and he
Uh-huh.
sobbed.
Yeah, well, maybe, you know, probably he had it rougher than I did.
I can't imagine. I don't think so. You had it pretty rough.
It wasn't easy. Wasn't easy.
In the displaced persons camps, were there ever any SS people who were hiding from war trials that you knew of?
No, I personally didn't come across any. When we went into Germany, we did come across some experimental clinics where they were experimenting with human beings, which seemed rather frightening to us. But now, you know, there are thousands of this there, and our viewpoint was very limited. We just had to march on the next day and take it down. And,
So you got back to the United States in March of 1946?
June of 45, 46. Yeah, I was in the Army 3 years, 46.
So you got back in June of 46 and then you got married?
No, I went to finish college for a year. Finished that in June of 47. I had the GI Bill and I had an opportunity to go on, so I went on to Harvard Business School for
Right.
2 more years. So that was 49, at which point I found a nice gal and got married. That was 66 years ago.
Yeah.
Battle of the Bulge was the most costliest action ever fought by U.S. Army. There was over 1,000 casualties. Do you think that it was worth it?
I think it was worth it. It had to be. Sure it was worth it.
Did the battle feel like it lasted more than 3 weeks? Because I read somewhere that it lasted 3 weeks.
A battle lasts more than 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Well, no, most of the battles, I guess, were won about 3 weeks, because then we were sent to another battle for another 3 weeks.
I think hey, you guys have any questions for him? I think you did very well, and we really appreciate your talking to us.
Well, okay. Do you want that book or not?
Could we borrow it? And
You can
we'll-
borrow it, yeah.
And we'll give
but-
it back to you.
But I'm gonna hold you responsible
fine.
for getting it
Okay,
back.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Well, thank you. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
You're the best.
Oops.
I'll get it.